Thank you so much for joining us at this very special announcement this afternoon. My name is Mohini Dadare. I am the Executive Director of North York Women's Shelter. Thank you for being here on a very wonderful day in the shelter's history. North York Women's Shelter is a 30-bed emergency shelter that offers crisis support to women who have been impacted by violence, including but not limited to sexual, physical, emotional, and financial abuse, often at the hands of their intimate partners, close family, and community members. As anti-violence activists, we know that one of the most dangerous times for a woman experiencing coercive control is when she is attempting to leave her violent situation. Her attempting to leave puts her at greatest risk for death. North York Women's Shelter has been a place of safety, support, and empowerment to an incredibly diverse group of women and their children since its opening in 1984. In the 33 years since its inception, over 11,000 residents have stayed at the shelter, determined to say no more to violence and build lives free of abuse. Today, I'd like to personally thank Michael Levitt, Member of Parliament for York Centre, the Honourable Jean-Yves Duclos, Minister of Family, Children and Social Development, Monty Quinter, our local MPP for York Centre, who isn't able to be here today, but does join us in spirit, and the Honourable Helena Jasek, Ontario's Minister of Community and Social Services, for being here with us today. I would like to extend a very special thank you to the Honourable Dr. Helena Jasek. Minister Jasek has been an incredible ally in the anti-violence movement. And she's been an incredible ally to the shelter sector itself and to the health and well-being of women and children. She truly is an advocate for our cause. Dr. Jasek is active with numerous community organizations in the York region, and in a moment, she has some very exciting news to share regarding our organization and the clients we serve. But before you hear from Minister Jasek, I'd like to introduce another strong supporter of North York Women's Shelter and welcome the MP for York Centre, Michael Levitt, to say a few words.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here today on behalf of the Honourable Jean-Yves Duclos, Minister of Families, Children and Social Development and Minister responsible for Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. Minister Duclos could not be here today, but he's asked me to extend his greetings and say a few words on his behalf. I'm proud to be here today with elected representatives from all orders of government, Dr. Helena Jasek, Minister of Community and Social Services for Ontario, and our local representative, City Councillor James Pasternak, two individuals who keenly understand the challenges facing our community and who I'm proud to work with, along with representatives from Monty Quinter, the MPP for York Centre's office. We share the goal of ensuring that the people who live here have access to safe housing, and that's why we're all gathered here today. I'm proud to be here to tell you that the construction of a new facility for the North York Women's Shelter will soon be underway. Financial support in the amount of $8.8 million from the governments of Canada and Ontario will help provide emergency shelter for victims of domestic violence and their families right here in York Centre. That's right. The North York Women's Shelter is vital to our community as it serves to provide a safe destination and a helping hand to women and families in need. I was recently here to visit the facility and the staff back in March of this year, and I must say how moved I was by the work being done there. The women and children who find safety here have experienced the worst, but the staff and the volunteers of the North York Women's Shelter show the very best of what our community can do. During my visit, I was struck by the lack of available space and the aging conditions of this much-used and much-needed facility. The financial support being announced here today will go a long way to addressing our community's very real needs. Families will benefit from this new space to escape unsafe and volatile situations, allowing them to get a fresh start on a new path. This funding will support the construction of a 16-room, 30-bed facility that will be accessible and provide quiet, private, and supportive space for women and their children. Our government believes that all Canadians deserve access to housing that meets their needs, when it comes to building an inclusive society where all Canadians have opportunities to succeed, housing matters. Budget 2017 proposes housing investments of more than $11.2 billion over 11 years. Included is a commitment to $5 billion to a national housing fund that will address critical housing issues and better support our vulnerable citizens. In addition, funding has been committed to make surplus federal lands available for the development of affordable housing, a unique strategy to help the lack of supply. There is also a commitment to a renewed partnership between the federal government and the provinces and territories to better support shared housing priorities. This, after all, is a challenge we must all meet together. These investments and many others will be included as part of the National Housing Strategy, which will be released this fall. The National Housing Strategy will help reduce core housing needs and lift more Canadians out of poverty, contributing to strong, more inclusive communities. I want to say congratulations to everyone involved in this project, the staff, volunteers, and community members who support the North York Women's Shelter, and to the province of Ontario that has been so supportive in getting this development underway, and of course, to those in need who will have a new place to turn during a time of crisis. To all of you, thank you very much and congratulations.
Thank you so much, Minister Levitt, for your very kind words and your unwavering support for North York Women's Shelter. We really look forward to working together for the sake of the women and children in our community. I now have the absolute pleasure of introducing Dr. Helena Jasek, Minister of Community and Social Services for Ontario. We cannot emphasize enough the thoughtful and committed support that Dr. Jasek has given the shelter sector at large, and we're thrilled to have her here today to share some incredible news with you.
Well, thank you so much, Mohini, and it really is a pleasure to be here with colleagues from all three levels of government. We're here today. So we have Mike, we have a real federal partner now that our government can actually talk to. As you probably know, since the Trudeau government was elected in 2015, we held our first federal, provincial, territorial meeting of ministers of social services, the first that had been held in some 10 years. So it was a pleasure to meet, of course, Jean-Yves Duclos, and to have our local councillor here is great too. And please give my best to Monty Quinter. I think everybody here knows Monty Quinter has represented this riding for over 30 years, and he's a man who perseveres, and we see him in the House, and I hope to see him back on Monday. So it's just great to be here and be able to partner with the federal government, a government that does understand the importance of investing in violence against women's shelters like North York Women's Shelter. So today's announcement is part of a $28 million investment in new funding that has resulted from the Ontario government working in partnership with the federal government to build and renovate violence against women's shelters across the province. Violence Against Women agencies provide crucial services that assist women and their children with the first steps to begin rebuilding their lives. I've visited more than 30 shelters in the province since becoming minister, so this is the advantage of staying with a ministry. It's my third year, and there are some 96, so I've got a way to go, but I've certainly seen shelters of all shapes and sizes, and certainly when I visited North York Women's Shelter last October at the invitation of Mohini, I was more or less lassoed at a meeting and taken there, but obviously, it's, as Mike has said, it's very obvious that you need a tremendous improvement in the services, the physical space where you offer your services. And I've seen all the work that has been done by frontline staff, not just at North York Women's Shelter, but all over the province. And again, I want to thank all of the frontline workers for the great work that they do every day supporting women and children fleeing domestic violence. So the North York Women's Shelter's current building has provided a safe and secure place for women and their children for more than 30 years. The building is aging and certainly is no longer able to meet the complex needs of the women and their children that it serves. And so that's why I'm so pleased to be part of this announcement that has North York Women's Shelter receiving more than $8.8 million to replace the current building with a bigger and better emergency shelter, and $3 million of that will be provincial funding. C'est pourquoi je suis très heureuse de m'associer à l'annonce de l'octroi à la Maison d'hébergement pour femmes de North York d'un financement de plus de 8,8 millions de dollars, dont 3 millions de dollars de financement provincial, pour remplacer son bâtiment actuel par une maison d'hébergement plus grande et meilleure. So this funding will allow North York Women's Shelter to replace the current 2-story, 3,000 square foot building with a 3-story, 24,000 square foot building. So this means that more women and their children who are fleeing domestic violence will have access to shelter in North York that is dedicated to helping them begin rebuilding their lives. And of course, the work doesn't stop there. And that's why the Ministry for the Status of Women and my ministry are currently working together to review existing programs and services to create an updated domestic violence action plan for Ontario. Last year, the Ontario government released Walking Together, Ontario's long-term strategy to end violence against Indigenous women. This strategy builds on the existing work of Indigenous partners, community organizations, and government, and it reflects the priorities of Indigenous leaders and communities to support healing. Through my ministry, the Ministry of Community and Social Services, funding for violence against women's services has increased by 53% since 2003. So that amount is now some $147 million, at least in the year 2015-16. Our investments recognize how vital it is that women get the immediate supports they need to move out of violent relationships and into a safer life for themselves and for their children. En faisant ces investissements, nous reconnaissons à quel point il est essentiel que les femmes obtiennent les soutiens immédiats dont elles ont besoin pour quitter leurs relations violentes et vivre une vie plus sûre pour elles-mêmes et leurs enfants. This is why we also created Ontario's strategy to end human trafficking. The new Provincial Anti-Human Trafficking Coordination Service is coordinating collaboration across government and with law enforcement, justice, social, health, education, and child welfare sectors. Now, this was a real eye-opener for me as I started visiting shelters across the province. And it is something that I think a lot of people, the general public, feel when they hear about human trafficking. They're thinking of people coming from overseas, you know, the story of the girl being promised a job as a nanny and then ending up in prostitution and being trafficked and so on, her passport seized. But what I really didn't realize, I think most people don't realize, is what's happening here in Ontario. The preying on very vulnerable young women, particularly even group homes and kids in care, where they're promised some security and love, and they fall for it, and then the next thing is that they're entangled in a trafficking situation. And I was down in, for those of you who know the province, Haldimand, Norfolk. Norfolk is quite close to Lake Erie. I hate to say it, but I sort of thought it was the middle of nowhere. Obviously not. But it's close to the 401 corridor. And so they were seeing a number of young girls in the London area being trafficked in the various motels along the 401 and so on. And in fact, the shelter down in Norfolk is seeing a number of young girls being trafficked. So really something that I think the general public is having a hard time to understand, because we don't really talk that much about it. But with our new anti-human trafficking office, led, by the way, by a remarkable woman, Jennifer Richardson. I'm hoping some of you will have the opportunity to hear her. She was an individual who was trafficked herself. She comes from Manitoba, a lot of experience in the field. And she's the ideal person to bring all the pieces of our government together to work on this particular initiative. So that recently, because we do have some funding for that particular office, I invited community organizations to apply for community-based funding to assist with solutions aimed to help agencies improve and increase services for survivors of human trafficking. As I travel around the province, I hear constantly about the need for more affordable, good quality housing for women and their children. So we have another partnership with the federal government. And as part of our updated long-term affordable housing strategy, my colleague, Chris Ballard, the Minister of Housing for Ontario, announced that we are investing more than $20 million over 2 years to provide a portable housing benefit to approximately 1,000 survivors of domestic violence per year. And the way this is being done, there are some 22 communities across the province that will be invited to participate in the pilot. There's a commitment for the City of Toronto of some $4 million. And of course, what is so good about a portable housing benefit, and this is an option that people will be offered, is that they can find suitable and affordable housing more quickly, not have to wait for a social housing unit to become available. So the funding is tied to the woman, not to the unit. And you're going to hear more about this approach as we go forward, possibly even related to the budget next week. You never know. As we know, the situation for so many women is that it's a huge difficulty in terms of finding accommodation. The decision to move, there are so many obstacles, including the financial penalty for breaking a lease. And so that is why changes to the Residential Tenancies Act, which came into force last year, will help women and their children escape domestic violence by making it possible for them to give only 28 days notice to their landlord. And while I'm very proud to be here to announce this funding, I look forward to the day when we no longer have to make investments in protecting women against violence. Et bien que je sois très fière d'être ici pour annoncer ce financement, j'attends avec impatience le jour où nous n'aurons pas besoin d'investir pour protéger les femmes de la violence. So together, I believe, especially all levels of government working together, we can build a province where everyone can live free of fear and threat of sexual violence and harassment. Thank you so much. Merci.
Thank you so very much once again, Minister Jasek, for your support and your very kind words, and just the thought that you put into the investment into violence against women. It really has an impact that I think as a sector we never imagined that we would get from government. So we really do thank you for that. It is with a tremendous amount of gratitude and optimism that I thank both the federal and provincial governments for this funding as a commitment to responding to violence against women. I also deeply thank the staff of North York Women's Shelter for their dedication to often very difficult anti-violence work. This is a very important day for survivors and for a tireless sector, and we're so very happy to see this dream become a reality. So thank you all. The number of women impacted by violence is staggering. The years have taken an extreme toll on the shelter itself, as both Minister Levitt and Minister Jasek have noted. The shelter really is falling apart. The service needs of women fleeing abuse have also shifted since the shelter was first built. And knowing that the new design, as we're able to reveal it, you'll see that it is built with a trauma-informed perspective, a harm reduction perspective, accessibility around multiple abilities and disabilities taken into the very design of the shelter itself. And so we're very, very excited to be able to build a new facility that really meets the needs of the diverse women that need the services of a shelter. Violence against women, as you know, is a broad and deep phenomenon that impacts women in every community in Canada. Shelters such as North York Women's Shelter, run by and for women, have been on the front lines of the anti-violence response, interrupting escalations of abuse that can and do lead to women's death. Shelters such as North York Women's Shelter also do the endless work of anti-violence education, advocacy, and prevention in our communities, pushing for an end to the conditions that see so many women experience violence in so many ways. For the sake of the safety of its residents, shelters are often anonymous spaces that must remove themselves from the public eye. But if we are ever to shift this outrageous and repeating phenomenon of violence against and the death of women and girls, Both shelters and women must visibly have the unwavering and determined support of our communities, which is why we're here today. So I sincerely thank you, our community, for your support and determination and for joining us here today to support women and girls. I'd like to particularly thank Councillor James Pasternak for all your support. This project would not have been possible without you really pushing where we need to push for a very expedited process, so thank you. Our sister shelters, without whose support we also would not have been able to begin this process, that support has been integral to us being able to move forward and even engage in thinking about taking something like this on. I would like to express my sincere gratitude and appreciation to our board of directors for their commitment and ongoing willingness to innovate in the best interests of women and children who access our services, our funders, our donors, volunteers, and our and our community partners who have absolutely been phenomenal over the years in supporting North York Women's Shelter. And a special thank you to our MCSS program supervisors, Sheila, Maya, and Francine, sitting in a row. And of course, MCSS Capital Branch staff, who, for all the hard work behind the scenes to make this possible, this timeline has just been outrageous, and without all of the support and the hard work and determination behind the scenes, we wouldn't be here today. And so, you know, the work that's happened in this room from most of you here has just been incredible. I would also like to thank the amazing Beth Jordan, who's not here today. She's often a train across Europe, for her advocacy, her wisdom, her support, and her drive in helping us build a vision for this incredible new facility, and our very special architectural advisory for their many volunteered hours to help us dream big and realistically. We had a group of volunteer architects come together to throw their support, volunteer hours, to really make sure that we dream big but realistically to make this shelter possible. Our spectacular architects who are in the room, Jana, Chris, and Chantal at LGA, and our construction management company, Ellis Dawn, and project manager Leith Moore have brought this vision to life. And of course, to the Domo Group, particularly Carol, Shane, and Garrett, there they are, there's Garrett, who, for letting us have the space this afternoon and for offering us refreshments. And lastly, of course, I would like to acknowledge and thank the many survivors of violence who have pushed us all to do better, have self-advocated and advocated on behalf of others for systemic change, and to whom we are all ultimately accountable. I thank you all for being a part of the solution and for being here today. Thank you so much.